Welcome back, everyone. I hope you had a good lunch break, managed to catch up on your emails, text messages, or connect with fellow delegates here in the meeting hub. So I'm really pleased that we've got a session here which is all about communication through transformation. It's about engaging employees in the face of uncertainty. So it's with Elyse Glenn, who's the Corporate Communication Manager with Schneider Electric. And Schneider Electric is a global leader in energy management and automation. Elyse is responsible for setting and executing the internal communications, PR, crisis management and thought leadership strategy for the company across Australia and New Zealand. Elyse has also held senior roles in communication at Beam Suntory. I hope you got free drinks there. And, and Vodafone. So I'm going to hand over to Elyse. Thank you, Elyse.
Thank you, and thanks everybody for joining this session. I've had a really fantastic time at the conference, so it's great to be asked to speak. I'm going to be talking about communication through transformation, and I think for everybody, if there was ever a theme for last year, it would be change. At Schneider last year, we were going through another huge change, and that is that we had around 650 employees in our Pacific headquarters in Macquarie Park move to a new Agile way of working. So it had been planned for the last 2 years. And today I'm going to share with you how we navigated that significant behavioural change through the COVID-19 situation. So first I'll tell you a little bit about Schneider and who we are. And yes, we are the leader in energy and automation, and our purpose really is to empower everybody to make the most of their energy and resources, building progress and sustainability for all. So we're not the lift company, we're not Schindler, we're Schneider Electric. And sustainability is absolutely the platform on which we build our entire brand, and it's our core purpose. So just a bit of information about who we are globally. So we have over 135,000 employees globally, and we have a model where we have members of our executive team based in multiple locations across the globe. So some are in Boston in North America, we have some in Paris, and then we have some in Hong Kong. So really that is because we take an approach of being the most local of global companies. And so empowering our local businesses and our local operations to really lead those relationships with customers is really important to us. So if we take a look at what we look like in Pacific, we've got about 2,500 employees across Pacific. Our headquarters is in Macquarie Park, and we've also got major sites in every state and territory in Australia and also across New Zealand. You might have heard of Clipsal. So Clipsal was actually acquired in 2003, and I believe Clipsal is in over 85% of Australian homes. So chances are that you've touched a Clipsal product in your home today. So a couple of years ago, we launched a new employer brand, and part of that included our EVP. So that's meaningful, inclusive and empowered. And then there are core values that sit behind that for employees as well. We really strongly believe that it's great people that make Schneider Electric a great company. And it's, you know, everybody in our business, whether it be employees and our partners and our customers, are inspired by our meaningful purpose. So that's that sustainability piece that I was talking about. Inclusive, which is really about diversity, but not just about being diverse, but making people feel that they can be their true selves at work and that they're included in work. And empowered is all really empowering people to make decisions to drive the business forward. I think sometimes when you're a really large global organisation, people can feel that they get stuck in the hierarchy. We really want to free people to be empowered to make those decisions that best serve our customers and best serve our business. So we're really proud. We've been ranked as the fourth most sustainable supply chain by Gartner in the top 25, and also this year we've been recognised as the most sustainable company globally, so by Corporate Knights. So we're really proud. We don't just talk the talk, we walk the walk. And our purpose is also to empower and give our customers the ability to be sustainable in their operations as well. So a couple of years ago, when we made the decision to move our Pacific headquarters, we had an ambition in what we wanted that space to be. And really it was creating a design, a space that was going to help us accelerate into our next stage of growth. We also knew that we wanted to have our products and our solutions in the base build and throughout the fit out. We wanted us to be able to showcase our space for our products, to also have customers really understand exactly what it is that we do and the value that we can bring to them. We also wanted to provide an opportunity for greater collaboration and flexibility, and we wanted to take the best practices of working and connecting from around the globe and also from the business community. So we actually had a look at other businesses like Lend-Lease, who had enacted Agile working, to see what we could take from them and what was going to suit us and our culture and where we are, and also where we wanted to be in the future. Another key part of who we are as a business is we are a really open business. So we wanted our space to be open to have employees come in, of course, partners and also customers to be able to work together in our space. And I know that, you know, Agile working and, you know, hot desking and all these sorts of terms are things that have been around for a long time. We at Schneider, we call it workplace of the future, because we wanted it to not just be fixed on where people work from a desk perspective, but it was a lot bigger than that. It was a lot broader than that. So when we designed the space, we had innovation, sustainability and collaboration as the absolute core, the core principles in terms of the layout of the space, the shared spaces. We also had internal stairs to connect the community. So at our previous facility, we had the lift well right in the centre of the office. And so we had employees literally split in half by the office, but then also by floors. There was no internal stair. And basically we had a series of offices where our executive team, but also the leadership teams that reported to the executive team, the Pacific executive team, had their own offices, and they were very separate, and everyone sat in their own teams. And then there were allocated desks. So a very traditional kind of open plan office space that you've probably seen before. And so what we wanted to do was actually create a more flexible design that would provide employees with a choice of places that they could work, whether it's sit for a period of time or collaborate with people. So we wanted to give people opportunities to choose places to work based on the work that they were doing and the people that they needed to work with. And so we created neighbourhoods. I'm sure many of you might even have neighbourhoods in your own workplaces. And basically that would mean that you would have a group of people, whether it be from a business or from a function in an area, given their own space. So we did see some models that had people being able to choose anywhere and there weren't any specific neighbourhoods, but we felt that for where we are, that people needed that sort of sense of a home base and a space that they could come that was kind of, you know, with their colleagues in their business or within their function. But of course, people were able to change and move where they wanted to. So look, we knew that change is hard. Change is really hard, and transformation is harder, because with transformation, you're actually asking people to change their behaviour, and we know that this is not easy. We knew where we were heading. We felt a strong conviction that it was the right way for us to move forward. And we knew the really specific change in behaviours that I've sort of talked about that we wanted to drive. And we'd actually created the space or designed the space with that in mind. So we were actually setting ourselves up for success. And so we knew as well, you know, changing behaviour isn't easy. And so communications alone, while important, it wasn't going to be enough. So part of what we did is actually bring employees on the journey right from the get-go. And so we'd had consultants come in and talk to employees about what they needed and what they wanted from our new space. So we had interviews with our designers, WMK, the architects, and we also had space analysts come in, and they found that we were not using approximately 40% of our space. So it was quite significant. So we had the location locked in. The building was currently in construction. We'd chosen the furniture. We were really excited, but we also knew that the change to Agile was going to be a really significant change for our employees, and we knew that there was going to be some resistance. So we were even hearing, even from people at the executive level, that they weren't sure that moving out of an office was going to work well for them. But it was actually our zone president, Gareth O'Reilly, who really advocated, along with other key members of the executive, to say, look, this is really important. We need to lead by example. So look, I had experience managing these sorts of communications before. I've done these sorts of moves. Vodafone did something very similar, and I was there when we managed that transition. And I'd also done something at a much smaller scale at Beam Suntory. So to be completely honest, I thought, oh look, I've done this before. This is going to be pretty much a rinse and repeat kind of exercise. I know what to expect. I had my comms plan ready. We were ready to start the major communications push. We were going to have a briefing town hall. We were going to have all employees come to a common space and unveil our new design. And we were going to have rooms with the furniture that people could touch and feel, and see the different finishes and the design boards, so they could really get excited about what it is that we were going to create. And we were also going to do things like mock steals, because we knew that we were asking people to pack their things away at the end of the day and put things in lockers. So we're going to put stickers on things saying, you know, this would have been stolen if you hadn't put it away, and things like that. And we were also going to do induction visits to the site, so as things got closer, people knew what to expect, ready for day one. So this was back at the end of February. And then, you know, we entered March, and we were due to move in September. So we were fastly, you know, quickly approaching the time when we were needing to enact this activity. And then COVID-19. So that changed everything, I think, for everybody. It was change on change. It was the biggest change I think any of us have ever seen in the way that we live, in the way that we work. And it was not just that it was the biggest change, but things changed really, really quickly. The quickest change I've ever seen in living memory, I think, for anybody. And, you know, we had a really robust pandemic business continuity plan, which, you know, we all got together, and I was sitting as part of that as the comms person for that, with our head of health and safety and environment, as well as our key executive stakeholders, to help us navigate on what we were going to do. And it became really clear that at the height in March, we actually needed to close the office. So the office actually hadn't been packed up yet. So employees were able to come in and take things like chairs or monitors home to help them work from home if they didn't have those things at home. But pretty much everything else was just as it was. And so everyone was having to work digitally. Now, we were really faced with uncertainty, to be completely honest. Back in March, we didn't really know how the world was going to change, and we didn't know what the world would look like in September when we were due to move. And we didn't know how we were going to be able to use our space exactly. We had these, you know, bold ideas that were absolutely in line with where we wanted to head as a business, about people moving freely around the space and choosing where to work according to their activity, and, you know, collaborating with colleagues. And, you know, we really were faced with needing to communicate something when we didn't really have the full picture. So it was a really, really challenging time, and there were lots of conversations with, you know, how are we best to actually move forward? But there was a silver lining. And the silver lining was that it actually provided a complete break from the old environment to the new environment. We actually had people transforming the way that they were working completely. They were actually working from home because they had to work from home. And that was, therefore, COVID was a real disruption. It was a new disruption, and another transformation, which was COVID-19, obviously. So we were really forced to accelerate our digital capability. We were already pretty digital in the way that we worked, but we had to kind of reframe the challenge and see the challenge as an opportunity, because quite frankly, we didn't have a choice. We had to communicate to our employees digitally. And I know that for a lot of people, moving to a new digital way of working, or being more digital, accelerating their digital way of working, that wasn't just something that happened at Schneider, that actually happened everywhere. So we saw for us that Microsoft Teams just went through the roof. We'd had Microsoft Teams as a platform for quite a long time, at least 6 months. and not many people used it. We had small pockets throughout the organisation. Marketing, for example, were really using it well, loving gifts, for example. But you know, a lot of other parts of the business were not using it at all. And we found that all of a sudden it became the #1 way of collaborating with each other, and that was actually quite organic because there was a need, and so people were finding the technology that was best suiting this new need. So globally, these are figures for Microsoft Teams daily active users. So there was a 70% rise within 5 months from November 2019 through to April 2020. So that's from 20 million rather daily active users to 25 million daily active users. So that is a huge jump, as you can see, 70% rise in 5 months. Now you would think that there would be a huge uptake during that time, and you might expect that that would kind of level off. But what we've actually seen is over the last 6 months to October, there was an additional 50% rise. So from October last year, there was over 115 million daily active users of Microsoft Teams. Now I'm using Microsoft Teams because I found these figures really, that's the platform we use at Schneider, and I found these figures, you know, readily available. But I think there were a lot of other platforms that people might have been using in similar ways, whether it be Slack or something else. So I think it was the need that was there first, and people saw the real need, and then they saw the way that this technology could be used. So we've seen, you know, it's grown exponentially, the use of these platforms since the pandemic. So the other thing that we had was we had insights from employees. So there were a lot of questions, and in June we decided that we would go out to employees and actually get their feedback on what their expectations were, what their fears were or concerns. And what we found was that 91% of Australian employees wanted to work in the office some or all of the time. So most employees at this time were forced into working from home. And so really it was a lack of choice. People were really feeling, I think, what they'd lost from being in the office. But that's not to say that they wanted to only work in the office. I think what we'd shown is that they were really desiring a hybrid model. And it's no surprise that the main reason was because they wanted to meet and collaborate with colleagues, with 86% saying that. So we also did a separate survey just to Macquarie Park employees. And about 341 employees responded to that survey, which was a pretty good result for us. And we found that 50% were neutral about feeling about the office reopening. And I think that tells to how people were feeling in June. There was a lot of uncertainty. And I think, you know, 14 were feeling negative, and 36 were feeling positive. So it was a real mix. But I think that neutral piece was really indicative of the uncertainty that people were feeling at that time. And what we found is that people who were catching public transport to Macquarie Park were more likely to feel negative about the office reopening. So it wasn't necessarily about the office that was their concern about, you know, colleagues and that sort of thing. It was actually more their exposure in the public environment on public transport. And actually 28% of those employees said that they were planning on changing their mode of getting to work, of actually driving to work. So we had these insights, and we were still faced with uncertainty, but I think as well, just going through the exercise of having a survey meant that people felt that they had an opportunity to be heard. But then of course, you need to do something with what you've learned, because if you just ask people for their opinion and then you don't actually feed that information back to them and share what you've learned and then share what you're going to do about it, then you can sort of lose a bit of trust from your employees. So look, communications 101, we all know it, it's know your audience, and especially in change and transformation, we've heard people talk about that throughout this conference. So at this time, I was really thinking about knowing your audience, but what do we really mean when we say that you need to know your audience? And of course, we rattle off, you know, we need to know who they are, we need to know their preferred channels, we need to know what's going on for them and what matters for them. But I think last year something was really distilled for me, and it's more than just knowing your audience, it's actually empathizing with your audience and knowing knowing how they're feeling right now and then how you want them to feel. Because if you do a comparison of those, then you can start to bridge the gap and build the communications and the actions that are going to help them get to where you want them to be. So we need empathy, I really believe this, to make real, impactful and culturally transformative communications. So when we do a think, feel, do analysis, I'm sure many of you will do a think, feel, do analysis in your communications plan. And it's really helpful to do that, to understand where you want to go. But I think we need to actually spend a little bit more time on the feel for now, because it's all well and good to know how you want people to feel in the future and what you want them to do in the future. But if you don't think about where they're coming from, then you can miss that jump and miss some opportunities to really make a difference. So Dr. Brené Brown, I absolutely adore her. I was lucky enough to see her speak in a conference in Sydney in 2019. Do you remember those days when we could all get together in big conference facilities? And she's really inspiring me, in her work on this. And she says that empathy fuels connection. And it's feeling with people. It's not sympathizing, it's actually feeling with people. It's perspective taking. It's taking the perspective of other people on. It's staying out of judgment, which I think is really important, especially when we're talking about change communications or transformation communications, where we want people to change their behaviour, and maybe we feel that the behaviour that we're seeing right now is not great. We can sometimes be quite judgmental in that. And I think it's also recognising the emotion in other people, and communicating that you recognise that emotion is really important, because it's sometimes just someone saying, I see that you're really concerned, or I'm hearing that you're really worried about this, can make people feel seen and feel heard. So for us, to be really honest, I think it was actually easier for us to empathise with our employees, because we were in the same boat. We were actually facing the same uncertainties, and we were employees too, not knowing where we were headed in September and what it exactly was going to look like. We were faced with the same uncertainty. And so we had the insights from the survey. And I think it can be more difficult to empathise with people when you don't have those sorts of insights, or if you're not in the same position as the people you're communicating with. But I think for me, that's something that going forward, I'm absolutely going to be focusing more on, even when it's more difficult, or especially when it's more difficult. So we wanted our employees to connect with our vision of the new culture and the new space, and so we had to empathise with them. So Dr. Brené Brown also talks about how empathy requires us to be vulnerable, because we're accessing the parts of ourselves that have felt the same way as the people that we're empathising with, and that's a vulnerable place to be. And we know that a lot of leaders will put armour up and not feel comfortable being vulnerable. But I think as communications professionals, it's really important for us to encourage our leaders to be vulnerable, and we know that that's really critical for effective communications. And so therefore it's a critical skill for our leaders. So if they want to be better leaders, then they need to be better communicators, and they need to have courage in that. And I think as well, sometimes in communications, there can be a tension between the tendency to want to protect a company position or a leader's authority. And sometimes we'll have leaders feeling that they need to put forward a certain persona as the leader of a company or the leader of a team. And actually sometimes it's not honest and it's not authentic, and people can see right through that. Or it might actually be so far emotionally from where they are that they're not sensing that empathy or sense of connection. So another common leadership armour that Dr. Brené Brown talks about is the idea that leaders need to be knowers and that they need to have all the answers. And we were in a situation where we didn't have all the answers. We had plans, but I think, we didn't necessarily know when we had to communicate that things were going to be that way in September when we moved. So I think, as communications professionals, regardless of the hierarchy in the organisation, we are leaders. We actually have a leadership position. We're actually coaching our leaders to show up and to be better communicators. And sometimes we have willing leaders who are willing and happy to take on that feedback, and sometimes we don't. And sometimes empathy and vulnerability comes easy to our leaders, and sometimes it doesn't come as easily. And so in this situation, we were really lucky because we had a president, our zone president, who was really clear on the purpose of why we were making this change, and also was really comfortable in sharing how he was feeling. And for him, he was really feeling a disconnection from people. He was really missing seeing people in the office and walking around and having those casual conversations with people. And also, just before we had to shut the office, his floor had actually decided to move out of and to sort of test what this new way of working was going to be. And so he had actually moved out of his office, and his office was turned into an informal meeting room. So he was really willing to lead by example and to talk about his experience, which he said, you know, took a little while for him to get used to, but he actually really enjoyed it. So the other thing that our leaders did is they really shared that the situation was changing so quickly that we weren't sure how we were going to be using our space once that it was opened. But we were really planning for those possibilities and reassuring people that we had different plans for a multitude of different scenarios. So in pointing out to the unknown and asking employees for their input, sharing that we were in the same boat with them, and that we were planning for a variety of scenarios, we gave clarity where we actually had it. And I think us being honest actually reassured people that we were working through it and that we had their best interests, and that and you know, we were preparing for the move. So what did we actually do? So some of the key things that I did, we actually had to rip up the old comms plan. We couldn't do the face-to-face town hall. We had to do it a lot later than what we'd originally planned for. So we actually had to do it in July, which, you know, we were planning to do our town hall in March, but it became clear that we couldn't do that. So knowing that people were using Teams, we did a Teams event. So a regular Teams call, you can only have about 300 people on a call. A Teams event, you can actually have up to 10,000 people on a call. And it's a little bit of a different experience, both as a presenter and also as a watcher. I'm not sure if any of you have been on a Teams event, but it's got a Q&A function where you can submit questions either anonymously or put your name to them. And there's a producer that sits behind and can choose which people are talking and who's going to be presenting and change screens and things like that. So it's a little bit more sophisticated. We held one of those, and we had about 600 employees join, which was a really, really good turnout, and I think speaks to the fact that people were really hungry to know more. And obviously before then we'd told people that this was coming and that we were changing, we were going to have our event a bit later and a bit closer to when we were moving, when we had a bit more clarity, and people were very happy with that. We had a preparing for the move flyer, so that was everything, just one pager that people could access that had everything that they needed to know on the logistics. And then we had key sort of communications from executive assistants about when people could come in to pack up their boxes, so that we didn't have people, too many people coming into the office to pack up at the one time. We had regular Yammer posts and updates on progress, so we were generating some excitement with how things were progressing, and then also post-move to sort of reinforce those messages that we wanted people to see in terms of the space being ready for you to come back and see it. And then we did Yam Jams with the project team as well. So a Yam Jam, for those who don't know, is where people jump on Yammer at the one time, and it's a Q&A session like a chat, but it's on Yammer, and it was an Ask Us Anything format. So we specifically wanted it to be completely open, so that if people had any questions that had come up for them, that they could ask anyone on the project team. And so we had over 500 employees access those. We did several of them in the lead up to. We also did virtual tours through video, and something that was really important is we didn't want the health and safety messages about how to clean your desk and get your temperature checked and that sort of thing to be separate or adjacent to the key messages. So we actually embedded that in to the virtual tour and the sneak peek, so that people got an idea of it totally as part of the whole experience of the sneak peek of the office. And then the day in the life infographic, that was exactly the same. So the get ready and travel and arrive, etc. All of those steps made it really easy for people to understand what they needed to do from a health and safety standpoint, but also to get a feeling for the space and how they could use the space. And then we had an induction pack, which was just a PowerPoint document as a PDF that had everything that they needed to know, including floor plans and, you know, local cafes and restaurants and things that they could go to as well. So we had unbelievable feedback, particularly from that Teams event. Sometimes when we're on these events, I know that it can be really hard for people to feel that they can't ask questions, or they might feel nervous about asking questions. We had so many questions, and I think that was because we'd given permission for people to do that. We'd made it really, you know, through the fact that we'd done the survey and we'd asked for people's feedback right from the get-go of the whole process. Even in designing the space, people felt that they could ask questions. And I think also just the nature of the topic, it was really personal for people. And so, you know, we knew that people were going to have questions, everything from, you know, is the gym going to be open from day one, for example, or where do I park my motorcycle? So all sorts of different questions. So if I have a think about what it is that I'm taking away, look, I think we know change is hard. Transformation is even harder, because change is very simple. There's a change, and the change is the change, and it's pretty clear. Transformation is slower to happen, and it's behavioural, and changing people's behaviour isn't easy, as we know. Another thing that I'm taking from that is that knowing your audience isn't enough. Just knowing who they are and planning for where you want them to go, we actually need to go deeper. And so Dr. Brené Brown's work on empathy for me has been really key in digging a little deeper into understanding where employees are at, because I think that sets you up for a much stronger platform for knowing what you need to do to get them where you want them to go. Another thing is, for us, digital. Look, digital has been a process for us, you know, a focus for us for a long time. And I think that last year, when we were forced to use digital in new ways, it's actually challenged me to think digital first, even in those places where it's not necessarily the first choice. And in fact, town halls, we now do all of our town halls digital only on the Teams event platform, not just for Macquarie Park, but actually across Australia and New Zealand. Before, we used to have cameras set up and we'd bring in a third party and we'd broadcast it to people in rooms, you know, all over the country, and I think, and New Zealand. And I think for us, actually having the Teams event meant that everyone had the same consistent experience. And there was also a bit more, I guess, authenticity. I mean, here you are, you're seeing me in my spare bedroom, and we're seeing our executive, you know, team, whether it be in the office now or previously, you know, in his office or her office. And I think, you know, there's an authenticity that people get from seeing people in the same way that they are on calls every day. So, and it's also saving us a significant amount of money, which is a bonus as well. And then the big thing as well is feedback and input. So providing any opportunity that you can when you're planning a big transformation to get people's opinions and get people's input so that you can help build it together. And also to get people to give their feedback and their questions as well, because I think digital really makes it easier than ever, whether it's a form survey or, you know, any other platform that you might be using. There's multitudes of ways to get feedback from employees, and so I think it's really important that that we keep that in focus. So what's next? To be honest, we have had only recently we've been able to bring employees into the office without having to book a desk. So one of the processes from a health and safety perspective that we brought in was for people to book a desk through the Condeco app, which is just an app where they can book a desk and then they know where they're going to be working for the day. Just with the latest restrictions easing, we've been able to open up the office so people don't need to do that anymore, which is fantastic. So we were already seeing a couple of hundred people come into the office every day, and we're we're seeing that will probably increase, but we don't expect that we'll have people, all people coming into the office 4 to 5 days a week. I think the hybrid model of working is here to stay for the foreseeable future. And likewise, our digital first mindset when it comes to internal communications, that has changed for the foreseeable future. I can't see us doing big town halls like we've done in the past. I think we're going to be doing them all virtually now. And also encouraging feedback and input anonymously, non-anonymously. I think we'll continue to do that. It's something that we've done in various ways, but I think this project was one of the most collaborative ways that we've got feedback and questions from employees from the past. But for me personally, the biggest fundamental shift for me has been my focus on empathy is critical to employee communications, especially when it comes to cultural transformation. I think, as I said, we can often get caught in where we want people to go, but empathising and meeting people where they are, I think, is really a powerful tool that helps you build all of your communications from that.
On that note, I'm going to ask you a few questions, Elyse, if you don't mind. So,
absolutely.
We've got a couple here. From Anne-Marie, we have undergone massive restructures as part of ongoing transformation. Throw COVID into the mix and we have real change fatigue across the organisation. Any tips on change fatigue?
Oh, look, that's a big problem. I think, and I think sometimes when, particularly when you talk about organisational structures, that can have a significant impact on people's engagement. So I think part of the way to deal with it, I think, is to actually get communications to be involved in these conversations earlier with HR. And I think sometimes doing communications on these changes or trying to align these communications in a condensed time frame so it's not dripping on for ages and ages can have a real impact. And I mean, you're always going to have a level of engagement go down with these sorts of things, but I think if we can try and minimise that and keep them to a condensed time frame, then that can help. But it is real. Change fatigue is definitely real.
Yes, I absolutely agree with you. Another question here from Jen. Would be interested to hear if you're using Teams for all employee comms managed by the IC function or more as a tool for smaller groups and project teams?
Right, so we use Teams mainly for team collaboration. So the communications team, we don't have an internal comms team. We have an internal and external comms team. So there's myself and another person on that team. And just from an Australia Pacific zone perspective. So we really use it as a collaboration tool rather than a communication tool. For communication, we use Yammer as our primary internal social media tool, and then we have all the other sort of regular tools that you have for internal comms. So you'll have your intranet and your newsletter and internal screens and all those sorts of things.
Okay, there's one more question which sort of leads on from that one from Anne-Marie. How do you engage with employees not accessing Teams and Yammer? And we've got 2 minutes left.
So the big thing with Yammer, I've managed trying to get people onto Yammer in multiple different businesses. Number one is you've actually got to have content on there for people to make it worthy for them to go on there. So even if you don't have a high uptake, make sure that you're thinking Yammer first for quality content. And the second is using your other channels to get people onto Yammer. So that might be, for example, in your newsletter, have the story sitting on Yammer and send people from the newsletter to Yammer to read the story. Or it might be using a QR code for internal screens for people to find out more or to get involved in a competition that you might be running on Yammer. So, using Yammer as the place, but you need to have quality content first. Otherwise, if there's nothing on there, then people won't want to use it.
All right. Thank you very much. We've got an hour and... not an hour, 1 minute 13. See, you can tell I haven't had enough sleep. 1 hour and 9 seconds, 1 minute and 9 seconds. So I was just going to ask you, Is there anything, apart from the empathy piece, is there anything that you would like to bring up as a key thing that we need to think about moving forward with hybrid working?
I think with hybrid working, it's really about engaging managers. So we know that employees really value what their managers have to say, and basically if your manager tells you to do something, chances are you're going to do it. So getting managers on board with what this new hybrid way of working is and means, and how they can engage their teams and empowering them to do that, is really critical, and that's something we've been working really hard at Schneider. And so we have people manager calls where we specifically talk about the challenges they might be facing, and we actually hear from managers sharing that, and then give them the tools that they need to be able to support their teams through that. So yeah, managers can be best advocates when it comes to this.
Perfect timing. 5 seconds to go. Thank you so very, very much, Elyse.
Thanks, Zora. Thanks everybody for joining.